I am doing my best not to make this a Zelda focused channel, but every time Nintendo releases some new footage, I see something I like and it inspires me. You see, I'm not a long-time Zelda fan. The only Zelda game I've ever played is Twilight Princess, and that was back when it first came out in 2006. And I thought it was good, but I never felt compelled to look into the rest of the series or buy Skyward Sword when it came out. I didn't grow up playing the original Zelda or Ocarina of Time, so none of what I'm saying about Breath of the Wild is coming from a place of nostalgia. Everything I'm saying is strictly coming from Breath of the Wild's ability to impress me as a standalone game. So with that in mind, let's get into it. Nearing the end of the 7th generation of gaming, I saw a huge shift in the way games were being marketed. Before, all you needed to do to impress people is to show a pretty cutscene and maybe a few shots of gameplay here and there to boast your new and improved graphics.
Check out these graphics.
But because of how limited and expensive television advertisement is, games would have to rely on name branding and word of mouth more than anything. Most people were only going to see glimpses of how your game was being played before they bought it anyways. But as the years went on, the echo chamber that is the internet became a much cheaper, more viable advertisement medium. Now more than ever, games still in development are put under a microscope. No longer are people satisfied with just a few clips and a trailer. Now people want to see exactly how a game is going to be played before they trust anyone with their $60. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing by itself, but I've seen it have a very profound effect on how most games are being designed. Game studios know that people are going to be meticulously watching their game for months, even years before the game even makes it into their hands. Because of this, there's a lot more focus being put into how a game looks rather than how it actually plays. And I don't mean just graphics. And I also don't mean scripted gameplay demonstrations, but I'll get to that another day. Ubisoft. What I mean is designing mechanics to look as clean, flashy, and fluid as possible, even if those design choices do little to better the feeling of gameplay when you actually go to play it. But don't get me wrong, these design choices aren't even particularly bad. There are a lot of great games that sacrifice a bit of control for visual fidelity. The issue is that it's becoming almost a mandatory rule for studios to follow. Nowadays, almost anything with any real money poured into it seems to have to pass through a set of guidelines. Every action, every movement has to look cool and realistic, or else it ain't getting made. It's affecting the amount of variety that we're getting in our games, especially here in the West. If you were wondering why there's been a sharp decline in genres that were once at the forefront of gaming, that's probably part of the reason why. It seems like the only real variety we get anymore either comes from our indie studios or from Japan. And speaking of Japan, Nintendo. And speaking of Nintendo, Zelda, Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
What makes this game so refreshing to look at is its lack of push to even try to make things look elegant or even practical. Now don't get me wrong, Breath of the Wild looks good. Like really good. But it only looks good with context. Take a look at the tree chopping animation. You can see Link swinging his massive axe like it's a feather. When it hits the tree, splinters explode from the impact point, accompanied by a big orange spark. Not realistic at all, but it really emphasizes that Link just hit something with a giant axe. After Link's first swing, the player has the option to tap the button again to go into a second swing, where he spins around and gives the tree a second strike. Again, not very practical, but it does a nice job to continue the flow of motion, and gives the player a sense of force given how fast the second strike fires out. I don't have the game in my hands yet, but I can already tell that time went into how this action feels for the player. The strikes fire out quickly, the impact of each strike is emphasized, and the second strike is a satisfying discharge of power from the momentum of the first strike. These animations only look good with the context that someone is playing a video game, and that each element is there to give some sort of feedback to the player. Is this making any sense right now? Because I'm pretty new to this YouTube thing, and I'm not the best at organizing my thoughts in a digestible format. Okay, here's a better example. You know those moments when Link does something with perfect timing and he has a chance to attack while everything is in slow motion? This doesn't look good without the context that somebody is playing a video game. Link jaggedly spinning in mid-air to shoot multiple enemies doesn't look impressive, but it probably feels damn good to pull it off. I'm repeating myself, but there's nothing wrong with prioritizing visuals over mechanics. But there's an ever-growing mentality in the industry that these types of games are the only ones worth putting any money into, because how a game looks while being played is its biggest selling point. And it stops a lot of studios from stylizing anything for the sake of gameplay. But what's really impressing me about Zelda is their willingness to show this kind of stuff in their trailers instead of the more appealing stuff. There's a shot from the latest trailer where Link is riding a horse while holding a giant axe, and he goes to take a swing at one of the Guardians. And there's nothing inherently cool about this shot by itself. To someone who doesn't play games, or even to someone who doesn't know anything about Zelda, There's nothing particularly interesting about this shot. It's just a guy on a horse doing a half-assed swing at a monster. But to someone who follows Zelda, it's, oh my god, you can attack those things with the melee weapons too? And damn, that's another new weapon. And you can ride up next to them and give them a smack and it ain't even jank? It ain't even jank! There's a lot of things I liked about the latest Zelda trailer, and I could go on all day talking about the way they reveal mechanics, or how they had the balls to show frame rate drops in their trailers and have people worried about it. Even though the game isn't finished yet, and optimization is one of the final steps of game design and has been proven over and over again that other companies have no problem showing us versions of their games that aren't a reflection of the final product and run at incredibly smooth frame rates even though the final product runs like a complete mess, but I'll save that for another time because this video is getting kinda long already. I just wanted to let you know that it's nice to see a decent sized budget game that doesn't feel the obligation to be designed a certain way.